I got the call last Monday. It came through an app I use to pick up freelance cleaning jobs. Nothing glamorous. Old storage units, order homes, that sort of thing. I've done it all. But this one stood out because of where it was. A crumbling post-war apartment building in Sumida, Tokyo. I almost didn't take it, but the pay was pretty good, and the request was urgent. The client was the landlord. He wanted the place cleared out fast. The tenant, an old man named Nishida, had apparently been dead for weeks before anyone noticed the smell. Natural causes, they said, but it didn't sit right with me. Natural causes usually doesn't lead to bloodstains soaking into the tatami mats. When I arrived, I understood why nobody had noticed for so long. The building was a tomb. The cracked facade, rusting railings, and broken tiles gave it a defeated look, and there were maybe 3 working lights in the whole place. The stairwell reeked of mildew and something sharp, almost metallic. I tried not to think about it. Nishida's unit was on the 4th floor, room 406. If you don't know, there's a superstition in Japan about the number 4. The word for, she, sounds like death. That's why you won't find a 4th floor in a lot of hospitals or apartment buildings. But this place didn't care about superstitions. I climbed the stairs, each step creaking under my weight. When I reached the landing, I hesitated. The hallway stretched out in both directions, dimly lit by a single flickering fluorescent bulb. My footsteps echoed, but they felt off, like there was a delay. I'd take a step, and half a second later, I'd hear it again. Brushing it off, I found room 406. The door was a sickly green, the paint peeling like dead skin. The landlord had left it unlocked for me. The smell hit me first. Even with a mask on, it burned my nose. Rotten food, sweat, something sour. The place was tiny, a single room with a kitchen area and a cramped bathroom. Nishida had been a smoker. The walls were stained a dull yellow, and ashtrays were scattered everywhere. There was a framed photo on the floor, face down. When I picked it up, I saw an old man standing in front of a torii gate, his expression somber. Behind him, the sky was a flat gray. I set the photo aside and got to work. At first, it was just the usual grimy stuff. Magazines piled high, empty instant ramen cups, and clothes so old they practically crumbled in my hands. But then, I found the scratches. They were on the walls, deep and erratic, like someone had daggered a knife across the plaster in a frenzy. Some of them formed patterns, circles, overlapping triangles, and even jagged spirals. My flashlight flickered as I traced them with my fingers, and for a second, I thought I heard something. A whisper. I froze, the hairs on my neck standing on end. It sounded like someone was breathing right behind me. "Hello?" I called out, my voice shaky. No answer. I was alone in the room. At least, I thought I was. The first real scare came when I opened the closet. It was one of those sliding doors made of thin wood and paper, and when I pulled it open, a stack of boxes toppled out, spilling old photos and books onto the floor. One photo caught my eye. It was another shot of Nishida, but this time he wasn't alone. A shadowy figure stood in the background, just barely visible. Its face was obscured. My heart sank. There was something wrong with this photo, something I couldn't put my finger on. The figure's proportions were off. I tried to shake it off, but the more I cleaned, the more I noticed things weren't right. Doors that I had closed were slightly open when I turned back around. The kitchen faucet dripped, even though I was sure I'd tightened it. In the air, it felt heavier, like the room was watching me. Then I saw it. I was kneeling by the futon, bagging up the trash, and something moved in the corner of my eye. I turned my head, and there it was, a shape, darker than the shadows, standing in the doorway to the bathroom. It didn't move. It didn't breathe. I froze, my pulse hammering in my ears. The thing was tall, too tall for the doorway, and its head was tilted at an unnatural angle. I couldn't see its face, just a faint glow of eyes reflecting the light. "Who's there?" I whispered, my voice barely audible. No response. I blinked, and it was gone. I should have left. Every instinct screamed at me to grab my stuff and run, but it didn't. The landlord had prepaid me half the money, and I needed the other half to make rent. So, like an idiot, I stayed. By the time I finished bagging everything up, it was dark outside. The building felt even emptier now, the silence pressing against my ears. As I carried the last bag down the stairs, I glanced back up at the 4th floor landing. The lights flickered, and for a split second, I saw it again. The figure, standing perfectly still, staring down at me. I dropped the bag and bolted out of the building. That night, I couldn't sleep. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw it, and the way it stood, how its head twisted at that awful angle. I told myself I wouldn't go back, no matter what. But the landlord called the next morning. He offered to double my pay if I'd finished cleaning the bathroom. I should have said no, but I didn't. I spent all morning pacing my tiny apartment, staring at my phone. The landlord's voice still echoed in my head. Just the bathroom. In and out. 1 hour. Double pay. I knew I shouldn't go back, but money has a way of overriding common sense. By noon, I was back at the building, standing outside and staring up at the 4th floor. It felt different in the daylight, less oppressive. The flickering lights, the smell, the shadows, they were still there, but somehow muted. I told myself I'd imagined the figure last night. Stress, fatigue, it just wasn't real. It couldn't be real. The door to room 406 creaked as I opened it. The smell had worsened overnight, thick and choking, and I had to pull my mask tighter over my nose. The room felt colder, too. Not the kind of cold you get from a draft. This was something deeper, like the walls themselves were leaching the warmth out of the air. The bathroom door was ajar, but I hadn't even touched it yesterday. I stood there for a long time, staring at that gap, the dark silver space beyond it. My mind screamed for me to turn around, to leave and never come back, but my legs moved on their own. I pushed the door open. The bathroom was tiny, just a toilet, sink, and a cracked mirror above a yellowing countertop. The walls were covered in the same erratic scratches I'd seen in the main room, only here they were deeper, more deliberate. They looked less like random marks and more like writing. I couldn't read the symbols, but they made my stomach churn. The floor was sticky underfoot, a dark stain spreading from the base of the toilet. It smelled faintly of iron. The mirror caught my attention. It was fogged up, like someone had just taken a shower, but the room was ice cold. I wiped it with my sleeve, and for a moment, my reflection stared back at me, wide-eyed and pale. Then, something moved behind me. A shape. A shadow. I spun around, but the bathroom was empty. I wanted to get out of there as quickly as possible, so I started cleaning. I scrubbed the walls, bagged up more trash, and tried not to look into the mirror again. The scratches seemed to shift when I wasn't looking, the symbols rearranging themselves into patterns that made my head throb. It wasn't until I opened the cabinet under the sink that I found it. A box. It was small, made of dark wood, and bound with a red string. The moment I touched it, my vision blurred, and the air around me grew heavy, like I was sinking underwater. I heard a low hum, faint at first, but growing louder, a vibration that rattled my teeth. I don't know why I opened it. Curiosity? Stupidity? Whatever it was, the knot slipped free easily, and the lid creaked open. Inside was a photograph, old and faded. It showed the same torii gate from the picture I found yesterday. But this time, Nishida wasn't alone. He stood next to the figure. The thing was even clearer in this photo. Its limbs were too long, its head misshapen, and its eyes. They weren't eyes. They were empty black voids that seemed to stare right through the camera. My hand shook as I turned the photo over. There was something scrawled on the back, in the same jagged script as the scratches on the wall. I couldn't read it, but the symbols burned in my mind like a brand. The humming grew louder. Then the lights went out. For a moment, there was nothing but darkness and that awful sound rising to a deafening pitch. Then the bulb in the bathroom flickered back to life. It was standing in the doorway. The figure loomed, its head twisted at that impossible angle, its limbs contorted like a puppet with its strings tangled. It didn't move, didn't breathe, but its presence filled the room, suffocating me. I backed into the corner, clutching the photo like a talisman. My mind raced, trying to make sense of what I was seeing. "Nishida?" I whispered, the name trembling on my lips. "Is that you?" The thing's head snapped upright with a sickening crack. And then it laughed. The sound was inhuman, a guttural choking noise that echoed in my skull. It stepped into the bathroom, its movements jerky and unnatural, like it was fighting against its own body. The scratches on the wall seemed to glow faintly, pulsing in time with the low hum that filled the air. I couldn't move. My legs refused to obey me. and all I could do was watch as it reached out, its fingers impossibly long and thin, tipped with jagged nails. "Leave me alone," I begged, tears streaming down my face. "I just wanted to clean the place." Its hand stopped inches from my face. For a moment, everything was still. Then, it spoke. "You brought it back." The voice was rasp, low and wet, like words scraping against rusted metal. I didn't understand. "Brought what back?" I stammered. It didn't answer. Instead, it reached past me, grabbing the photo I dropped on the floor. It held it up, tilting its head as it studied the image. Then it turned its gaze to me, those empty black voids drilling into my soul. "You shouldn't have opened it." The humming exploded into a deafening roar. The lights flickered wildly, and the room seemed to twist and distort around me. I screamed, but the sound was swallowed by all the chaos. The last thing I saw before everything went black was the figure stepping closer, its hands reaching for my throat. I woke up in my apartment. For a moment, I thought it had all been a nightmare. The bathroom, the box, the figure, just my imagination running wild. But then, I noticed the photo on my coffee table. It wasn't the same as before. This time, I was in the picture. I was standing next to the Torii gate, my face pale and hollow, my eyes blank and black. And beside me, the figure loomed, its hand resting on my shoulder like we were old friends. I stared at it, trembling as I noticed something new at the bottom of the photo. A date. Tomorrow. This story is brought to you by Audible, where you can get a free audiobook and a 30-day free trial by signing up with the link in the description. If you're craving something truly terrifying, I highly recommend The Haunting of Hill House by Shirley Jackson. It's a chilling classic that will keep you on edge with every word. Audible makes it easy to immerse yourself in horror anywhere you are, on your commute, during a walk, or even late at night. Click the link in the description to claim your free copy of The Haunting of Hill House and start your 30-day free trial today.